This essay is in part about the fact that science has overlooked the unconscious, and Dr. Jung is trying to explain to us what the consequences of overlooking the psyche are. I'm reading from Marginalia on Contemporary Events, which is in volume 18 of the Collected Works of C.G. Jung, paragraphs 1367 to 1371. What science has discovered can never be undone. The advance of truth cannot and should not be held up, but the same urge for truth that gave birth to science should realize what progress implies. Science must recognize the as yet incalculable catastrophe which its advances have brought with them. The still infantile man of today has had means of destruction put into his hands which require an immeasurably enhanced sense of responsibility, or an almost pathological anxiety, if the fatally easy abuse of their power is to be avoided. The most dangerous things in the world are immense accumulations of human beings who are manipulated by only a few heads. Already those huge continental blocks are taking shape which, from sheer love of peace and need of defense, are preparing future catastrophes. The greater the equalized masses, the more violent and calamitous their movement. When mankind passed from an animated nature into an exanimated nature, it did so in the most discourteous way. Animism was held up to ridicule and reviled as superstition. When Christianity drove away the old gods, it replaced them by one God. But when science de-psychized nature, it gave her no other soul, merely subordinating her to human reason. Under the dominion of Christianity, the old gods continued to be feared for a long time, at least as demons, but science considered nature's soul not worth a glance. Had it been conscious of the world-shattering novelty of what it was doing, it would have reflected for a moment and asked itself whether the greatest caution might not be indicated in this operation, when the original condition of humanity was abolished. It was the triumph of the Enlightenment that such things as nature spirits did not exist at all, but it was merely that what one imagined such spirits to be did not exist. They themselves exist all right, here in the human psyche, unperturbed by what the ignorant and the enlightened think. So much so that before our very eyes, the most industrious, efficient, and intelligent nation in Europe could fall into a state of non compos mentis and put a poorly gifted house painter, who was never distinguished by any particular intelligence, but only by the use of the right means of mass intoxication, quite literally on the altar of totalitarianism, otherwise reserved for a theocracy, and leave him there. Evidently, neither knowledge nor preparation of any kind is needed for the direction of the state, and without any military training one can be a great field marshal. Even intelligence blanches at the sight of it, and cannot but marvel at the unprecedented genius. It was indeed something quite out of the ordinary when a person came along and cold-bloodedly stated that he would take over the responsibility. It was so stupefying that nobody thought of asking who was accepting the responsibility, or of taking the necessary precautions against public mischief. At all events, the thing promised far too much for anyone to take serious offense. The psychopathologist is familiar with this particular genius of irresponsible promises. It is called pseudologia fantastica. In other words, he is a pathological liar. And it is considered quite a feat not to be duped by such people, especially when they exhibit in a high degree of symptoms of possession and fits of pathological effect, the classic frenzy of the prophets. Nothing is so infectious as affect, and nothing is so disarming as the promised fulfillment of one's own selfish wishes. I do not dare to think of what might have happened to us Swiss if we had had the misfortune to be a nation of 80 millions. According to all the psychological precedents, our stupidity would have been multiplied and our morality divided by 20. The greater the accumulation of masses, the lower the level of intelligence and morality. And if any further proof were needed of this truth, the descent of Germany into the underworld would be an example. We should not delude ourselves that we would not have succumbed too. The presence of traitors in our midst shows how easily we succumb to suggestion, even without the mitigating excuse of being a nation of 80 millions. What protected the Swiss was above all our smallness and the inevitable psychological consequences of this. First, the distrust of the little man, whose one thought day and night is to ensure that the big man shall not bully or cheat him. For this, if one is small, must be expected of the big man. The more disrespectful the big man is of the little man, the more they arouse defiance and obstinacy. Now I certainly won't, says the honest citizen, whether he is accused of being a misogynist, a conservative, or a numbskull, has no effect on his instinctive reaction. In times of unrest such as these, we are protected by our deep roots, by tradition, which, thank God, is still alive and cherished, by love of country, by a profound conviction that no tree ever reaches up to heaven, and that the higher it grows, the closer its roots approach to hell, by a taste that likes the middle, do nothing in excess of the Greek sages, who knew only their polis, and presumably never even dreamt of a nation of 80 millions, and lastly by the aforesaid bad qualities, which we certainly don't wish to conceal. We have had enough of this from the other side of the Rhine. The healthiest, most industrious, most efficient, and staunchest nation, how the fish rise to this bait. Anyone who is really convinced of his own and his nation's imperfections will not fall for the power of the superlative, the whopping lie. He knows, or should know, that the statesman who toys with unlawful measures is ultimately working for the ruin of the nation. The demand for the truthfulness of the nation's leaders must be the fundamental principle of all politics, however humdrum, undiplomatic, unmodern, and short-sighted that may sound. Success that is obtained by bad means, sooner or later, ends in ruin.